Good day. Welcome to the Stronger Vision podcast. I have John Stein on the show today, and John Stein is an exercise physiologist. Just so you know, exercise physiologist is one of the highest standards that you can get as a trainer, and it's a master's program that he took back in university. And we'll actually dive into what it was like to do a master's program, to find out what it was like to do research around exercise and nutrition, and then for him to work in the real life and find out what really does and doesn't carry over. And we also talk about what it's like to work with cardio rehab patients and what lessons you can take. And I tell you, there's some really valuable health pieces here. And from there, it's just really a lot of trainer talk. We even talk about what could make a good trainer. What should you look for? And John has some great tidbits on this. Of course, we dive into what are some of the main issues that we got to be concerned with, misconceptions on social media. We also talk about the MAHA movement, as he is from the States, and I'd like to hear his feedback to see what he feels like about this new political movement that really directly affects our industry. And lastly, we dive into his own story, as he has a really valuable one where he had a weight gain going on as he's going to school. And it's something that you can heavily relate to if you're someone who had the weight insidiously climb over the years. And he talks about how he had to transform his own habit and lifestyle. And then we finish off talking about his more current ambitions with running. And as a side note, it is going to be the end of the 60 days right around the time that you hear this podcast. So, you know, in a couple weeks, I'm going to have a full detailed podcast telling you about how the challenge went, all the pros, the cons, the ups and downs, and giving you some more details that you can learn from. And you'll even find out that I might be keeping the challenge going. But more importantly is that this upcoming week, for 7 days from March 7th to March 13th, I have a 30% off sale for the Cookie Monster program. As you can imagine, the Cookie Monster program is designed so that you can have a good, healthy diet, but still include cookies while you do it. It's also going to have customized program so that it fits your lifestyle, time-efficient workouts, and these workouts will be designed to get you stronger, put on some muscle if you want to put on some muscle, and definitely prevent any injuries in the process. The major thing is I'm here to coach. You get a one-on-one coach that's going to help you get from point A to point B that really cares. And I'm really excited for this. This program I've worked on for many years. I've continued to alter it. And as you can see within the Cookie Challenge, this stuff works. And if you want to see any of the proof, go to my website and go under the client stories. You can see firsthand how well this program has worked for many people. Not that many workouts, 3 to 4 workouts a week. Every single client is encouraged to include their cookies or treats or burgers, whatever it is that makes them feel like their diet's sustainable. So look forward to that. It's coming up in the next week, and don't hesitate to reach out if you're looking to hop on. But enough of that for now. Let's dive into the episode. Without further ado, here is John Stein. Good day, John. How are you today?
I'm doing amazing. How about you?
I'm terrific. Thank you, sir. So it's great to meet you. You know, we're both in a mentorship, and I figure why not, you know, catch up with another online coach in this crazy online space that we're in.
Definitely. Always happy to chat.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to know more about you, because certainly the listeners got to know. So why don't you tell the listeners who you are and how you got to be what you're doing now?
Yeah, so I'm John Stein, currently in South Carolina. I work actually in a hospital setting, working cardiac rehab. So I work with patients who have just had open heart surgery, some type of cardiac event like that. Outside of that, I am an online personal trainer mostly. I have a degree in kinesiology and a master's degree in exercise physiology. So that's how I got to work in that hospital setting. Personal trained for over 10 years now, both in person and online. I've worked with pretty much any type of client you can think of. I've had at least one, client who's had that background. So it's really helped me develop, a wide range and a wide view of fitness and health and what kind of guides me, for myself and for a more typical population versus a more diseased population as well.
Wow, that's incredible. It's awesome that you went all the way to the XPhys, degree. I had actually done some schooling for it. I actually had all this stuff for the testing, but then I didn't want to work with the people in disease states because I was working with athletes. So I decided not to. But what people need to understand is, like, you're I don't think it's 100% right to say, but I say you're basically an exercise doctor because you have all the requirements that are needed to walk someone who is like highly at risk for exercise as an exercise physiologist. And when a doctor wants someone like a cardiac patient or a
Yep.
cancer patient, they ask you to do it. So that's why I'm
Yeah.
like, you're an exercise doctor essentially, but it's very specific to that demographic, right?
Yeah, it's pretty. What's so interesting and why I love it is that all the data that you see where it's like, okay, if you just do this little bit, you're going to see this much improvement. This is the population where you can just a slight increase and a slight little bit of activity can have such a dramatic effect. That's where you can see this biggest jump. And, for a more typical person that might not be in that state, but leading up to that, like just doing that little bit is so key. And being able to see that, with this population that is, coming back from pretty much zero to being able to just do the daily tasks that you and I take for granted is really rewarding for me. And it's the reason I love it. It's for them, even though sometimes they might not, love it and embrace it right away.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really cool to hear that you get that kind of, experience, the value from that experience. So what led you down that? Like what got you even into, kinesiology? Like, was it anything from your youth or what kind of inspired you to take that path?
Yeah, so when I initially went to college, I was an athletic training major. So I worked with athletes in their sport with injury prevention, things of that nature. I worked for a D1 football team and a D3 school, and I really thought that was the path I wanted to take. And then once I started down that path, I was like, this doesn't give me the freedom that I want from a job and the enjoyment. So instead, taking all of that knowledge and with my passion of fitness, just started diving right into training individuals like myself, like my friends and family. And that kind of led me down that path. And then through nutrition, being able to learn that. And then as time went on, I was like, I want to take this to the next level. I want to understand this even more. And that's what led me to getting my master's in exercise physiology and really diving deep into the science. A study I worked on while getting my master's degree was directly tied to weight loss and weight loss management. So able to see that from a more scientific, point of view of like, this is what you got to do. This is where your health markers will change, metabolically and cardiovascularly. And actually being able to do that research hand on with participants was amazing. And then, that just led me to now working more one-on-one, with that cardiac rehab background.
Cool. I'm really curious. So what was the study that you did? Like you said, it was weight loss maintenance. I'm just curious of the protocol and what kind of conclusions you guys drew from it.
So, how the study worked was it was directly going to look at weight loss maintenance, which most places haven't done. There are protocols for it, but they haven't been researched because it takes a long time because you have to now get these people from start to weight loss and then research their maintenance. So in order to do that, you have to take them through that. And that takes a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of, participants, because like for students that are working for you, you only have them for maybe 2, maybe 4 years at the most. So it's a lot of work for the university and for, the person running the research study. So what we did was they had a protocol. It was a medical based weight loss. So it was nothing that's actually sustainable. It was more of like drinks, like protein drinks, soups, cutting out a lot of food on top of exercise itself. So we did a lot of exercise. They had to come in, they trained with us. They were in a certain, heart rate zones, doing mostly cardio for that. And so it was like if I believe like a 12-week program that they went through this, and they would slowly, after about 6 weeks, start adding back regular food into their diet. And then we would track that. They met with a dietitian, and they went through that protocol to then qualify for the weight maintenance program, depending on how much, they lost during that time.
Well, and what else did you guys learn from that? Essentially, interesting protocol that
Yeah.
it still frustrates me when I see it in exercise sometimes, and they're just not considering strength training as part of the model. But
Yeah.
like, I understand it's an efficiency thing that like you can
Yeah.
tell someone to bike, heart rate zone, control
Yeah.
variable.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why it's for this, it was not included because they were trying just to get to the maintenance station of the protocol. That's like really what he wanted to research, because most of like ACSM, things of like scientific organizations don't have updated maintenance, because they've all been doing research studies on weight loss, but nobody knows how to have protocols for maintaining it. So from there, what they kind of learned was exactly that. They saw the markers. They saw, their A1C went down, their lipid panels went down. All these things decreased from when they initially went. We would do DEXA scans. They would have the fat loss, their body fat percentage would go down. Their muscle would mostly maintain, but they would lose some percentage of it. But most people were, they kept a significant amount of muscle mass on top, which was pretty interesting to see.
So they maintain muscle tissue even though they were doing during the weight maintenance specifically, or after
the weight loss. The weight loss.
So that's
they were still able to maintain they would lose some, as everyone does, during a typical fat loss phase. But they were still able to maintain a good portion of the muscle that they did have.
Do you know roughly the percentage that was fat mass versus lean mass?
I don't have the exact number off the top of my head.
I wouldn't expect you to. I was curious because I've just like, even from my own experience with clients and stuff like that, it's like, I've seen some research that you can get like 90% of it being fat mass and 10% lean mass, but I typically see way more in practice. So that's why I was really curious to hear some numbers. But so given that experience being in, master's research, you understand the research. I'm really curious how you feel about now being in the practical world and having to really practice yourself. Like, what are some things that you really like about having that experience, and what are some drawbacks from, the scientific research?
Sometimes what you find is the protocol of, you need to do this between this and this, like your max heart rate needs to be within 30 of resting. For some people, it's great. It's a great, to keep them under control, because obviously with my population, we're trying to make sure they don't have another cardiac event. So we have to keep them under control, because we know higher the heart rate, more likely there is to be a cardiac event. So, but for some people, depending on their previous fitness history, that's not necessarily true. So you have to calculate, and you have to, go to different protocols in order to make sure that they're being challenged appropriately and progressed appropriately. Also, it doesn't always account for what's practical in real life. How much time, how much effort, does someone need to do, and what do they have access to? Some of my patients don't have access to a gym. Sometimes they, just being able to walk around their house, because, they don't have a street to like go for a walk around. Okay, just do laps around your house. So you have to be able to accommodate what's written to what's actually practical for them to complete, what you're looking for them to do.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing. It's like, there's so many research articles, and especially nowadays with social media, that the research gurus that are coming out and they talk about something, and they say, hey, this research found XYZ. It's like, that's why cold tubs are exciting and saunas are exciting. It's like, yeah, but people aren't even going for fucking walks, guys. Like, I don't care about that research yet. Andrew Huberman had this whole fat loss podcast, and during it, he didn't talk about a calorie deficit once. And he spoke about calf bumps. Like, if someone just like bounced their calf throughout the day. And I think it's interesting information. I think it's valuable information for people to realize that those who actually have a genetic disposition for metabolism that makes them want to spontaneously fidget, it's proof that if you bump your calf enough, you can burn a lot of calories. Like that's actually impactful. I'm not telling my fucking client to bump their calf. That's just they're just going to be fidgety and be like, yeah, I'm burning calories, guys. You're just going to be like, that's not likely, right? That's a subconscious level of thinking for some people. It's an interesting insight, but it's not helpful. So when you talk about the practicality, I think you only really learn from experiencing with people. So now that you're more in with working with people online, what's been, something that's been challenging for you as far as like getting used to the online side of things?
So online compared to, in person, in person, you can change variables like that. If something's too easy, instantly challenge them. If something's too hard, you can instantly dial back. You can instantly make that change, which is, both good and bad. In person, that could make that person more reliant on you because you're instantly giving them the feedback, where online, maybe they'll learn a little bit quicker because they don't have that instant feedback and they kind of have to process it themselves. So it's kind of like a catch-22 in that sense. Also, just being able to communicate with them. I'm a big people person. I love to talk with people. I think they're massively interesting. I think you can learn from every single person. So getting to know a client and having just, a conversation about their day, you get just that little extra feel of who they are and who you are. I think when they feel comfortable with you, you reach a whole nother level of just having them open up to you. And I see it every day with patients. They'll sell one person one thing, and then they'll tell me a completely different thing just because maybe they feel more comfortable with me versus that other person, or vice versa.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's called personal training, right? Like it's a person, and every trainer will talk about like, you are a therapist. Like no matter what, you're 100%. You're just not really well-equipped therapist, and some people, that's what they need. They just need a rant, and you got to be there for that space. But it's also really rewarding because of that. One of the things I think that I always appreciated when I was running like groups and personal training, and rarely in a lot of forms of business is someone who you serve thank you directly. Like the word thank you every single time you help someone is actually a valuable thing. So imagine that you just grind it out with whatever job and absolutely no one says thank you once. Like that doesn't feel as rewarding, even though you do a good job. And as a trainer, especially running like, groups or anything like that, I would always hear thank you. It's like people appreciate it. And that feels really powerful. And so for sure, I understand that connection that you get with the people. Now, we were going to talk about this because I find your background's awesome. People need to know that this is like the highest form of education as you could have as a trainer, other than just getting a PhD, which just really actually equips you for more research. It doesn't necessarily make you a better trainer, but you have some of the highest education. And I went that route as well. I just didn't get the full ex-phys. And I'm curious how you feel about the online certifications for trainers. And like, what's your feeling overall of them? Good or bad? Like, how do you feel about that?
I think they're great for what they are, to learn a basis of knowledge and education. I think that there's a lot of like nuance that can be learned through fitness and nutrition, a lot of hands-on experience. I think I learned a lot from my degree, but also a lot from my in-person experience, from other trainers, from bosses, friends, mentors, throughout my whole career. I think that if I were going to go back to it today, and I enjoy school, I enjoyed getting my degree, both of them. I love learning, I love research, I love science. If that's not you, you don't need to go that route. I think you can learn a hell of a lot by not doing that and not have to, pay the money for it if that's not the route you want to take. So I think you have to set yourself up. If you're eager enough to go learn the knowledge and do that, you don't need the school, but the school is going to give you that, concrete, you're learning this, you're learning this, you're learning this,
Yeah, I'm very torn at it
Yeah.
because I fully agree. It's not required to be a great trainer.
Yep.
My best mentor and boss, AJ Zeglin was he's my boss at the first place that I learned everything. Like
Yeah.
I was going through school, I was there, and even with all the stuff in the textbooks, like I still had no idea. And
Mm-hmm.
he had no formal education other than a weekend Can Fit Pro thing, and then just a shitload of practical knowledge. And he was interested. So,
Yeah.
One of my feelings is like kind of similar to yourself. Like if you're not going to do the education, you still better be well read. You should be
Yeah.
really interested in it and obsessed with it. And you
Mm-hmm.
don't have to go the absolute degree route necessarily. I
Yeah.
found that kinesiology gave you fertile ground to understand what the actual practice could do, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
you understood all the concepts, you knew about muscle physiology.
Yep.
I'd say 80% of it I didn't use again.
Yeah.
But the thing I was grateful for, I'd say for sure, was more of when I was doing some of those XPhys courses and knowing how science has evolved, and for people to appreciate that. Because if I hadn't done that and valued the scientific process, I'd be probably a lot more vulnerable to a lot of these ideas online, because if someone could just say something. It's like, oh, is that true? It's like, well, is it true on average based on all of these studies and appreciating that they have evidence? Some people can just say shit now, especially with nutrition these days.
Oh yeah.
So I would just say that I feel kind of still torn, but no matter what, if you want to be the best at it, you should really still be obsessed and be as well read as you can. And someone should still respect the scientific process. Now, more from the listener viewer who isn't a trainer and thinking about this, I think giving them the kind of educational piece of appreciating what makes a good trainer and what makes a bad trainer would be valuable, right? So I'd love to hear your kind of perception of this. What should people look for? Because we're saying they may or may not need to have a degree, maybe a certification, but then what else should a person look for in a good trainer?
Yeah. So I think it comes in multiple pieces. First is the personality. Do you mesh with that person? Do they understand where you're coming from? Because there are plenty of fit people that aren't necessarily going to make great coaches or great fitness people. And they have to be able to understand you and understand where you're at, and to be able to get you to where you want to be. So do they understand where you want to be as well, where you're at and where you want to be? And do you understand their personality? Everyone's got a different feel. Some people are more aggressive. Some people are a little bit more laid back. Some people are a little bit more, level-headed. Like, does that flow with you? Because if it doesn't, it's probably not going to be a good mesh, and it's probably going to, not end well for you as a client. And then two, you want to know at least that they've done this before. Have they shown that they have done this? If you don't know that they have a degree or a certification, have they done what you're looking to do with previous clients? Client testimonials, things of that nature. If it's just online and you're like, I don't like, tons of these people online, you can do anything now. So if you're worried about that, ask them, hey, can I reach out to 2 or 3 of your previous clients? If you're really unsure if this coach is the right fit for you, reach out to their clients. Because I know my clients, I imagine your clients as well, would be happy to tell people about how amazing you are. Because that's what, good trainers do. They leave an impression on people. It's not just the goals and achieving those goals, but they leave them in a better state. Just because they're not clients anymore doesn't mean that they, weren't left in a better state than they came to you with. So those would kind of be like my two, pieces that make, a good trainer.
Yeah, I love where you started. It's like just the idea of the journey, right?
Yeah.
Do you really see where I'm at and where I want to be? Because you could try to take someone on an unrealistic journey. It's like, no, we're just going to do it this way. It's like, but I'm not there. Like, I'm just not there. And meeting a client where they're at is super important. Like, some people, they, can't handle a meal plan. Some people will say, I want a meal plan. Like, some people are just in a certain position in their life. Hey, I'm not ready to calorie track. No, but you're going to calorie track. Was like, some people aren't there. And so for you to help them on a journey, and where do you want to be? Right. So, and so I'm going to take you all the way to, your leanest physique ever. It's like, that's not where I want to be. I just want to be healthier. And so those questions are super important. And like you say, evidence is so valuable. Talking to, clients. I mean, someone might train you for free if they have no evidence, right? Like, I mean, that's usually where we encourage people to start. I think the one other piece I want to add to that is probably just how good of a communicator they are and empathetic, right? So, those two things are super important. I mean, you're going to get, the good testimonials if they have that skill. And, I think if someone's not empathetic or understanding where you're at, like, I think that's a huge thing to me, is understanding where you've been, because fat loss especially can be such a difficult thing. And if you've been a person who never had to lose body fat, like, I don't know why you're going to these people, because they're not going to give you a sustainable routine, right? But biased opinion. So what type of clients do you like? We can talk more specifically online. This is more the new venture, and you're typically in the hospital setting. But what kind of clients do you usually work with online? Is it still some cardio patients, or do you have some more general population?
Yeah, I work mostly with, general population, mostly fat loss and general fitness goals. Very typical to myself, people that are just looking to perform their best, feel their best, look their best. That's kind of, the lane I kind of stick in.
That's
for
great.
my clients.
Yeah. And so, like you said, from your own experience, what was your own experience with your own fat loss journey? Was it ever specifically more difficult? Did you have any transformations of your own kind of evolution?
Yeah. So like when I first started training, like, back in college, it was just, for fun to stay in shape. I have been a big runner, since, high school. So I've always ran long distances. But after college, I got really into strength training when I first started, personal training, trying to get that max squat and bench and deadlift, and got really into that. And then when I kind of moved into my master's degree, with the stress of life and everything like that, I put on, more weight than I've ever been. It really kind of, as people say, sometimes it just, you blink and it's there. And I just felt the worst I've ever felt. And I'm like, I'm a trainer. Like, this is what I do. This isn't how I should feel or how I should look. So I kind of had like an aha moment, like a New Year's resolution, like January, like stepped on the scale. I was like, this is a weight I said I'd never, ever be at, and, I've lost over like 25 pounds, been able to keep it off. And right now I feel and look and perform the best I've ever been. So kind of learning, not really from scratch, but kind of had that full journey of going through, okay, I think I know what I'm doing, kind of falling off that track, getting into some bad habits that sometimes you don't even notice that you're doing until you wake up one day and you're like, why do I feel like crap? And you're like, oh, this is why. So kind of going from there to where I am now, being able to, have my best runs that I've ever had before, being able to, I've kind of gotten away from like max lifting because it didn't really feel good on my joints. I started, feeling it in my knees and my hips. I'm like, I run too much to be able to be, in that type of joint pain. I can't have that, running, 10, 15 miles in a run. I just can't do that. So
that's great. I love hearing that transformation. I think it's so helpful for individuals to know that you've been through the struggle yourself. And like you mentioned, it's those insidious calories that just, you just over lifestyle and everything. And so many people relate to that. The idea of, I got busy. And that's most people.
And it's so easy. It's so simple and easy to get into the wrong lane without even knowing it. You just slowly drift, because especially with a lot of, and it's slowly starting to change, and I can see it changing, with it within social media, and just like regular life. Like, people are slowly shifting out of, some of these bad habits, or even noticing that they are bad habits, with processed foods, and with all of that stuff, sugar, salt, and slowly realizing, hey, things that we were doing as 15 years ago aren't good for you. And we know they're not good for you. And you might not have, looked any different, but now it's catching up to you. You're starting to feel those effects that maybe as a teenager or in your early 20s, that you're like, I can do that. I don't feel like I can just push through. As you get older, you realize, oh man, I can't do that anymore. That's not realistic. I don't feel good. Like, I can't not feel good.
Right. And the thing that I find, I always used to say that it was a good thing I was a chubby kid, because I had to take it serious. I couldn't take it for granted. Yeah. And a lot of people who are younger and staying younger, and all of a sudden they're older and overweight, and it's just like, I don't know how this happened. And it's like, because they didn't care. And you ask them how they eat, and they're like barely eating. And so it's like, but how am I adding so many calories? And it's like, you show them a meal plan, it's like, this is too much food. Mm-hmm. So, when you finally actually can, I think that the really interesting thing that you mentioned there is like, the day that you wake up and like, this is too much. Tell me, what was that like? Because I find everyone has a different aha moment. And I always call it like igniting the gunpowder for life, because you have these like small little insidious moments that are adding to it, but you also adapt to seeing yourself being overweight. So you are feeling it, but it's not too dramatic. It's not like if your knee hurt, boom, I got to get this fixed. It's actually like a chronic knee issue that sneaks into you until like, fuck, I can't walk today. Yeah. So what was your moment like that was like, I got to do something?
I think what really caught me was like pictures. So like, I would see pictures of myself, like from posting on Instagram, or just even like on my phone, just like we're just scrolling through pictures, and I'm like, I would see a picture and I would just be like, that's me. That's really what I look like right now. And I just remember being just unhappy with it and being like, that's not who I am. That's not how I feel that I look like. I feel like I don't look like that person. And then, then you step on the scale and you're like, oh, maybe I do have that little bit extra weight that I maybe didn't notice that I put on, because, 20 pounds at that point, was a 2-year process. It wasn't a overnight thing. So slowly it creeps on. And then now I think, like, I even look back and I'm like, this happened way before that moment that I decided to lose weight. I can see pictures, 2 years before I even decided that I need to do this. Oh, I can see it in myself. I can see myself slowly, gaining that weight, and, through the health choices. And it wasn't that I wasn't active. I was very active. I was working out multiple times a week, training people. It slowly adds up, especially, poor decisions with food, and, you can't out-train a bad diet, as they say.
Yeah. Oh, we wish we could. So, working with fat loss clients, what do you think, especially from your experience, and what do you feel like gets overlooked from individuals that you work with that they're just not aware of, that from your journey, you even learned a lot?
I think the biggest and probably the easiest change that most people can make, and maybe it's not the easiest, but the simplest, is eating out. I think for a lot of us, it's very convenient, and it's very in front of our faces, and sometimes it's the only choice we have. But I think that's also because we don't have a plan set for ourselves in order for us to succeed. And that takes some steps and some change. But I think once you can make that change of eating at home and making those choices for yourself and setting yourself up, even for the same types of meals, but made by you, like that can drastically automatically cut so much processed foods out of your diet, so much of those calories out of your diet, just like that, just by making that choice of, okay, instead of Chick-fil-A, I'm going to make myself, that for the week, make a chicken sandwich. Like you can have that, still have delicious food, but it's going to be at a fraction of what it is. Even if you go for the healthier options, it's still going to be a fraction of what you can do.
Yeah, the processed food is the major problem. And I mean, the downside there is work. People don't want to plan. They love the food variety. What's interesting, though, is you don't actually have as much. Most people don't even have that much variety. It's just that they don't have to make it, and they feel like they have variety if they don't have a plan. Because any day you can go out and I'll go to Chipotle, I'll go over Chick-fil-A, and it's like, well, you did that last week too. Like you have a routine. You just like the openness of thinking you can do anything, but if you set out this plan, it's going to make you more uncomfortable. Not to mention, now it feels like, oh, that's a lot of work. It's like, okay, well, how much time do you think it really is? Because if you're leaving your job to go to Chick-fil-A and anywhere else, it takes you a half hour to an hour to complete that whole trip. Now let's add that up for let's say it's your lunches throughout the week, and you were to be able to prepare 4 to 5 lunches on a Sunday. 15 minutes per meal, adding up to make an hour or two, you save time. It's just more work, right? It's just more responsibility. And people don't like that. Like that's the biggest discomfort. And what's great though, is once you get on the other side of this thing and you stop eating out so much, you realize how simple it is. It's just that initial discomfort that so many people have a hard time with. So I think that's a really valuable piece for people to appreciate. Now, sorry, go ahead.
I think it's like people think discredit is that there are levels to this thing, to fitness, to nutrition. A lot of people think that they need to be at level 5 out of the get-go. And level 5 is prepping, cooking all your meals, having it all set up and understanding that. It doesn't need to be, like you said, there doesn't have to be a lot of variety at the beginning. At the beginning, it might be chicken, rice, and broccoli. And that might be your cooking level. Like that might be the level that you need to take it to start off. And then maybe you take it to that next level, depending on, what feels comfortable for you. Not everyone's a cook. I love to cook. I love to eat. So it's something that's easy to me because I like it. But you might not like it, and that's okay. And you keep it simple and you keep it easy and you do what fits right for you.
Yeah, I love that you pointed that out, that there's levels. And you actually have to start very simple in like those basic structures. It's terrifying to hear someone who is used to eating out all the time. Yeah, try eating chicken, rice, and broccoli for a while. And they're just like, what? It's like, okay, maybe not broccoli, carrots, like whatever, but just try cooking for yourself. And here's the biggest thing. Structure consistently at the start. And this is I just feel like when you have not proven to yourself that a calorie deficit with consistent eating works, you have no motivation to do it. It's like, you won't believe that you can save money until you stop spending, right? It's like, okay, budget for 2 weeks and this is all you can spend. And then all of a sudden you have an extra $1,000. Like this shit works. And exactly. Whereas like if you don't budget and you just go, it's like, I don't know, I've been trying to save my money, but I'm not really saving any money. It's like, you budgeting? No, I'm not budgeting. I'm just kind of feeling it out. It's the same shit. And so if someone can just start at that basic level, yes, I know it can be boring. Yes, I know it's very structured, but then you get past, I always give people a 2-week challenge. You do 2 weeks like that. Then you say, whoa, hey, the scale's going down. Yeah, it was work. There was temptation, but you prove to yourself this shit's real. Now make that food taste better for yourself. But like people are so afraid of that first leap and they massively underestimate how rewarding it is because that food can taste really good. And I totally agree that like you, and I think it's a huge advantage to enjoy cooking, but I think any level of enjoyment in cooking is the success of cooking, right? So if you've never cooked, I had a client who said I would get anxiety over cooking. And it's like, man, that's not the place for anxiety in your life.
Yeah.
Like like he has a family, he has a job, like you got much more things to be anxious about in the world. And if you haven't cooked, it's just something to get over. But I also put a caveat to any of these things. It's my opinion. There are coaches that have there's intuitive eating coaches, there's these holistic coaches that have all these different angles. This is like, I'm similar to yourself. These are our approaches.
Yeah.
It's not the only way up the hill. And if you find something else that can work for you long term, by all means. But
do it.
I'm with you on that. Now, with that, because there's so many ideas on social media, I'm really curious about this. From your perspective, there's so many highly debated things these days when it comes to especially nutrition and fat loss. What are some things you feel really strongly about that you wish people understood despite all the debate and noise?
For me, like the biggest thing is that I think a lot of people look for fall for these very complex ideas, these very complex things that are like the top of the pyramid, because like the top of the pyramid is like the best part. Like that's the cool stuff. And it's like, well, you're not there yet. You're not like the benefits you get from a cold plunge or maybe a very specific type of diet that helps you perform 0.1% better, or that supplement that gives you that 1% edge. Well, you're not even going to feel that effect because you don't eat the right amount of protein or get enough fruits or veggies. You don't walk enough. You walk 2,000 steps a day. You're not strength training. If you just do these simple things, like maybe one day you can incorporate that and you actually get the benefit from it. But to 99% of people, like that's not really going to have that great effect. Is it cool? Probably. Yeah, cool. I love the idea. I don't have a sauna, but I love the idea of going to a sauna all the time or doing a cold plunge because I've done it and it makes me feel good. I'm not doing it because I think it's going to help me look shredded. Is it actually? Probably not. Like it might. The evidence is still, but it's also doing the things that just make you feel good. And sometimes you can just do things to make you feel good, not because you think they're going to, change your life, because those things probably aren't going to change your life. But walking every day will, eating right every day will, strength training, doing cardio, those things will actually drastically change your life. And it's not like, a hyperbole. Like it actually will. There's so much evidence that it will drastically change your life. Weight loss, cardio, strength training. It's all been proven that it will decrease your risk of death. And I think that's what most people are looking to avoid. Yeah. I haven't met a person who's not trying to avoid death. Like that's what we're trying to be here as long and as healthily as possible. Because, what I see every day, I see people in their 50s, their 60s, their 70s, their 80s, and some of them aren't living a great life. Like it breaks my heart. Like I want them to live a better life. Like that's the game I wish most people understood that they're playing. Like that's the real game.
Yeah, that's a real valuable piece. And I love that you said that. Like you see the far end of it. You see the consequences of people's actions. But yeah, it's stepping over $100 bills to pick up dimes. Like when people are trying to talk about cold plunge and, hot therapy and all this stuff, it's like, it's cool. It's like, but how often are you strength training? Like I'm instantly not concerned unless you're at a healthy body composition. You're strength training a minimum of twice a week and you're getting in 10K steps and you're optimizing sleep. And those are simple, not easy. Simple doesn't make it easy. Simple actually is usually the greatest complexity to fit it in all the time. And once you're doing that, then we can talk about these extra percentages. But like you mentioned, it's like the athletes that it matters for that are going for gold because, something like beta alanine will make it different in a 45-second split. If you're a swimmer, you're not a swimmer. Don't worry about it, right? Like this stuff isn't the most impactful thing. Someone asks you about a supplement. It's like, creatine, I'm like on board with most things, unless it's just fundamental health. It's
Yeah.
not going to make it, even if someone doesn't want creatine, I'm like, I get it. It's okay. Like,
Yeah.
because it's
It'll be
technically not a
fine.
nutrient. It probably is better, even almost like a nutrient, but it's technically not. So
Mhm.
if you don't want to spend money on it, I'm fine with it. But make sure you get some vitamin D if you're not going outside. Like, the
Yeah.
thing that I care about is the health. And I just think that was so powerful the way you said that. You see the far end of the consequence here of like how people live their life. And I'd be curious, what do you see that other people don't? Because so many people are like, not aware of what's happening at the far end when people have these cardiovascular events. What do you think people aren't aware enough of when you see people like that?
I think people don't realize is that it's what's happening to a lot of these people in their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s isn't happening to them on that day. It is not happening at that moment. That is when the event's happening. The precursor to that was 20, 30, 40 years of consistently not doing something or doing something that was putting them at risk to that. So, and I think when this event happens, for a majority, not there's still a minority that is like, I'm not changing. I'm 80. I'm good. I'm not changing. Okay, I can't fault you on that. Okay, go for it. I can tell you how you could live maybe the rest of your years a little better, but to each their own. But then there's a portion of people that realize I need to make a change, and they drastically change their entire life. And yes, that's going to help them, for the latter little bit that's left. But if only they realize that 10, 20, 30 years ago, they would probably not be in that position.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's so hard to communicate to anyone. I mean, I kind of get it. Like,
Yeah.
it's like, have you started a long-term savings account yet? And it's like, some people do, some people don't. Right.
Yep.
But this is health. And I always say nothing's as scary as when it's on your front door. When you talk about someone,
Mm-hmm.
the term health is just too broad and not too immediate. That's why fat loss is actually effective once you get that aha moment. But before that moment, it's not enough. It's like, yeah, I could lose some weight, but until you have that shit, I got to lose weight moment, it's not enough. And I usually try to give people like a context of, imagine, part of your lifestyle that you really love could be like, let's say, eating chips is going to be the result of you living, instead of 90, you're going to live to 80. And some people might just keep eating chips. Like a good
Yeah.
portion of people is like, yeah, 80 is a good run, kind of like the individuals you're talking about. Some people
Yeah.
are just content with that. But then if you paint them a picture and it's like, yeah, but you're going to miss your grandkids. You're not going to see your grandkids and you're not going to see them graduate. Like,
Mm-hmm.
whoa. Now it's a part of a life that seems like a reality that you don't get to actually exist in. But if you just say something vaguely in the distance, it's
Mm-hmm.
not the same value. So I'm the same. I totally wish I could communicate with people I know, people I love. Like, you got to do it now. You got to do it. My dad straight up said, "Yeah, I need to have I just need to have the big one, and it'll like smart me up." He's like, that's his logic. Like, yeah, well, you might not get by that one, by the way. So
Yeah.
that's not a great mindset, but it's so hard. And I mean, this is really how I personally feel we are up against the most in the fitness industry.
Yeah.
Yes, there's debate around nutrition. There's far less debate around the right methods for training. Like,
Yeah. That's pretty
maybe,
much locked in.
yeah,
I
we
think
can
for the most
agree
part.
that you need strength, you need cardio. What's the most optimal? Yes, there's debates
Yeah.
within the right strength training, the right methodologies of cardio, all that stuff.
Yeah.
But we know we need it.
Mm-hmm.
And like, so the exercise is actually more locked in. Sleep, you need. And then nutrition, yes, there's debates, but we probably want to be at a healthy body weight.
Yeah.
So if we know the what to do for the rough, it's just like, why don't we? So it's all about
Yeah.
long-term behavior change. And to me, it all comes down to psychology. And this is probably
100%.
the hardest thing in our job. We're not psychologists, right?
Yeah.
So it's just like you really hope that you can find people at the right mindset. Like you said, you got to meet them where they at so
Yeah.
that you can take them on that journey that they need to be on, because we could prove to anyone if you just follow the diet plan and training plan, we can prove anyone to lose weight. But it's just like, can you sustain it? Right?
Yeah. And that's where, like they have all these behavior change models, and we meet the people that are in the stage of taking action, but there are so many more steps before the action step. People can contemplate for months, years even. You know, it it sometimes doesn't happen overnight, and it's frustrating. It can be, especially for people that understand how important it is. But you sometimes you grow to accept that hey, I'm here. I can help you. I can help you when you're ready. Because if you're not ready, I've had clients that say they're ready, and then you go to do it and then they don't do any of it. They don't show up to the trainings. They don't show up even in person. They pay a lot of money and they don't show up, or they're maybe not ready to, change their diet. And, maybe that's psychological, stopping themselves, trauma, things of that nature. It can take a lot for a lot of people. It's not always, the simplest idea, but I think that I think knowing that there are people out there that can help you is like huge for people to know that, like, hey, I can come to, John, Rylan, anybody. I know this person will take care of me and will help me get to my goal when I'm ready.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can't force people.
No. It's lead the horse to water, right? And I mean, I always go back to this example, as funny as it was. When my parents told me to go do homework, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it well, and I would fuck around.
Yeah.
But when I was motivated to go do it, holy shit, did I do it, and I did it fast.
Yeah.
And so, I always use that example and I try to communicate with someone that I wish I could help, and I'd like to train. Like, parents are a prime example. You can't force it down someone else's viewpoint, right? And I always feel like, to some degree, it's like a religion of training and nutrition. It's like a religious discussion to them, because they have their ideas and they're not sure of it. And so then you're trying to welcome them to your religious church in some degree, but they think you're crazy. And it's like, trust me, I want to make you a believer. And so there's just this resistance that people can have. But like you mentioned, if someone's ready, we just got to be there. And until I think the system can be more set up, I think long term, what I hope to see in the fitness industry is that there is more tools available for coaches and trainers to better work with people on the psychological end of things. Like, you take, even with kinesiology, man, I took kinesiology, I took a nutrition degree, and neither of them hardly at all touched on the psychology of nutrition. And the psychology of nutrition is like the biggest thing.
Yeah, and so it's the hardest.
And they all overlap. It's the movement, it's the food, and it's the mind around it. And it's like, all of these degrees stay away from each other, because it's like, it's not your scope. It's like, well, it's definitely a part of your scope. And if you ignore it, it's like, when you finish in kin, you're not allowed to give any nutritional recommendations. And unless you're a full dietitian, and then in dietitians, they know so little about exercise physiology. I was a fourth year course, and anyone in kin aced that nutrition and training course, and all of the nutrition people had such a hard time. It's like, how do you not know physiology? It's like they're not overlapping. But anyways, it's a bit of a side tangent, because but it's a huge problem in the industry that I hope that we've solved one day. With that being said, this is, you're from the States, I'm from Canada. Yeah. And there's some big drama going on. I'm super curious about this. The MAHA movement, Make America Healthy Again. I'd love to know your view on it, and, goods and bads, just how are you sitting on it over there?
When it comes to my point of view, when it comes to food, like, I have really, over the last 5 years, slowly but surely started to eliminate processed foods from my diet altogether. I think they have a place in the sense of nutrition. Like, some people, if that's all you can eat, go for it. But I think that our food can be and should be healthier overall. And I'm not a food scientist. I don't know the nitty gritty of, artificial flavors, natural flavors, dyes, things of that nature. I don't, really dive too deep into that. I think personally that's too like nitty gritty. Like that's getting into the weeds. Like my diet isn't dialed in enough to worry about if I'm having a certain amount of these qualities of food. And I'm like, I don't even really eat that much of it anyway to probably even notice a difference in, what's in what. I think personally, like if I could change anything when it comes to food is the price of it. Like the understanding of like what's the access that we have to high quality food. I've traveled, to other countries. I was in Greece this summer and on an island in the middle of the Mediterranean off the coast of Turkey, and I could have a meal for significantly less than I could in New Jersey, outside of New York City. Like to me, that doesn't make sense. This island does not have the access that I do in New Jersey. Why is my food 4 times the price? Like to me, conceptually, that doesn't make sense to me. And maybe that's just my I don't know understand the economics fully, but to me, conceptually, that makes absolutely no sense. I feel like it would be very different.
I couldn't agree more with that. Like, if there's something that I hope this movement tackles, is that it's the food availability problem. Because,
Yeah.
I love how you mentioned it too. It's like this is the nitty gritty discussions that we're having. It's like, is the red food dye a problem? It's like, why the fuck are you having it? Like, stop having Fruit Loops.
Yeah.
It's like you're actually so pumped that they're taking something out of Fruit Loops. Why are you eating Fruit Loops like more than once a week? Like, just don't eat a lot of Fruit
Why are you
Loops.
drinking Coke every day? Why are you eating that food every single day? You shouldn't be even having it like once a week. Like,
It's and if it's like now, illegal, it's like that doesn't change. Like they have a new red substance they're going to put in there and it's still Fruit Loops. You haven't solved the problem. And so like what you're mentioning is like, man, I just like we don't need to eat it. And not to mention the debates around it are so nitty gritty. They're so like, and I'll follow guys like Dr. Ids and stuff like that. And he does a great breakdown, but I'm like, I'm not going through all these fucking papers. And it's also quite apparent that people who are like really there's still people I think that are very, what I call elitist naturalists. Like they're just like, you have to have nothing but whole food, whole food.
yeah.
I'm not disagreeing that you should try to have mostly whole food, but they become like religiously about it. And it's like, oh, if you have any artificial flavors, gums, anything, you're on the wrong team. And so for me, it's like, sometimes it works. We just don't have to be so like dead set. It's like, yeah, we're trying to include mostly whole food. But if the MAHA movement can actually do something to make that availability a real thing, that could change the world. Like you mentioned, my girl's from the Philippines, and hearing the food costs in Philippines is incredible. Like I'm so excited to go because it's so cheap. And I mean, like you're right, there's economics we're not aware of, but there's no doubt that if government can fund so many things that it does, right?
Yeah.
Not to get super like dangerously political and like wars and all that stuff, but you are funding a lot of fucking shit and you subsidize corn. Why don't we subsidize the shit that we know for sure can help people, right? Like subsidize fruit, subsidize vegetables, subsidize lean meats or something like that. And that would make the hugest impacts on probably the economy too, because more people would want to make that kind of food, but for sure the health. And so I think that's where I'm hoping. I don't have any problem with, them caring, the MAHA movement caring about it. Like the fact that it's a real political talking point and it hasn't been seriously taken for ever, right? Is awesome. But I do think that there's also some dangerous debates around it because I think again, this is just my point, my viewpoint, doesn't mean I'm right, is that I don't know how well read the people like RFK is actually when it comes to some of these things. Like, how do you feel about seed oils? I just got to ask.
So I think that to that point, I focus mostly on olive oil to begin with. So I don't really, I don't really but I see no problem with it. You shouldn't be using too much oil to begin with.
No.
You know, like that's like, and anyway, with the processed foods that are going to have that in it, how much of that are you really eating or should be eating?
Okay, so he says like you switch the oil with beef tallow at In-N-Out Burger, one of the burger joints. I'm like, who fucking cares? Go ahead, do it. Do a study. And where are you going to be? These people are eating oil, deep fried oil fries. That's a fucking problem. They're not eating homemade baked fries. Like, or if you can even put a little bit of oil, put it in an air fryer, and it's not that many calories. French fries just have a shit ton of calories.
Yep, exactly.
Doesn't even matter if it is olive oil. It's just like a problem that you're eating this. And so that's why I think some of these political talking points are kind of stupid, right? And so it concerns me to a degree that that's a talking
You're fighting the
point.
wrong battle.
Yes, right.
Wrong battle.
Yeah. Anyways, I just have to get that off my chest a little bit. So I'm glad.
No, I agree. I think sometimes too, when it comes to science and factual data versus opinion.
Yeah.
Like you can't just form an opinion with these little group of studies and ignore all of this. Like it all has to be included, and then you can form an opinion, but it's just that it's an opinion based off all the facts, because other people can have and interpret data in different ways. And some people can, think that this study was great, and then another person could say why this study, wasn't great. And most studies, at the end of it, they tell you what their flaws are. They have to. That's part of the scientific process. So you have to understand how that works. And two, like nutrition studies are so hard. They are so hard to do. And that's why nutrition is such a weird, science, because it's impossible to really train humans on specific foods and specific things, because we eat so many different things. So what is the variable? We're not all living the same way. So you're not doing the same amount of exercise. You're not eating exactly the same thing in the right amount of calories. That's why you'll see the diet soda with the aspartame, and they gave it to rats. It's a rat study, because you can't do that study on humans. You can't. It's impossible, and it's unethical, obviously.
Yeah.
You're not going to test to see if humans get cancer from this. You can only do it as a causation. And even at that, it's so loose. Was it the aspartame they were having, or was it just the fact that they smoked, or was it the fact that they lived in, New Jersey, or whatever it may be? There's no way to fully test that and account for every single variable, because that nutrition is such a small portion of it.
There's too many variables, especially to review over long periods of time. That's why you can do clinical trials, and it can only usually be 3 to 4, maybe 5-6 months if you have a ton of money. And the thing that really annoys me with the seed oil thing is that they try to look at correlative data, right? So we know that's the worst data. The worst thing you can do is try to correlate things, epidemiological studies over a long period of time. The same people who are saying don't have seed oils are also fans of meat, and red meat specifically. You want to look at the correlative data on red meat? It's shit.
It's there.
But that is a ton of confounding variables. And when you look at the isolated epidemiological studies that actually take into consideration when red meat is healthy, done in a healthy dose, it looks great. Same thing with seed oils. You don't want to look at that, though. You don't know. Let's not look at that. Let's look at the correlation when we want to. And so I'm just use evidence when it's there and when it's not there. And so it's super frustrating. And that's the one concern I have. I think it'll be a net positive, but it's also really dangerous, I think, when you have people who are making policies who don't know science enough, right? So I don't know. I mean, I'm a neighbor to the country, so I think it's going to affect our culture. So that's why I'm super curious. I'm excited because it's great that, the person who's in charge cares about it. But We'll see what it ends up being. I want to leave off on a positive note here.
Definitely.
So why don't you tell me the Strong Ambition podcast? So I want to know what you're really ambitious about, what's coming down the pipeline. It could be personal, business, anything you're really excited about.
Yeah. So personally, my big goal that I set out for, a year or two ago was by the time I'm 40, I want to run a 3-hour marathon.
Oh,
So, that's like the Boston Marathon qualifying time. That's how I got that time. And it's just something I want to see physically, performance wise. Can I do it? I might not. I'm going to try my hardest, see what my body can do, and, have fun along the way. And it's a great connection piece with, my friends who are all runners. It's, just a fun challenge. It gives you something long-term to kind of think about. Can you do this? Because like it was Tony Robbins, I think, said it's like we overestimate what we can do in 1 year and underestimate what we can do in 10 years. So I always kind of just gave myself this giant goal to see,
yeah.
can I do it? I've never run a marathon, so I don't know if I could do it. So that's like my fun, ambitious, personal goal.
That's awesome. Are you hoping to run a marathon in the near future?
Probably not this year. I was dealing with an injury the last probably year or so. I'm still really trying to get back fully performance wise to get myself into a time that I can really push up my mileage and get that mile time to where I need it to be. So I'm working a lot more on my 5K and my 10K right now to get back into my half marathon. So
that's cool, man. I did one full, I think it was like 6, 7 years ago. It's the time that's such a battle when it comes to those, because eventually you're doing a prep run that takes you hours. So that's the real big thing. And but if you love running, that's going to be a fun thing for you. I think even though not everyone needs to do a marathon, I think almost anyone can learn a lot about themselves doing a marathon.
Yeah,
it's a great test of character. The whole training experience and really achieving it is a huge accomplishment. So I'm excited for you, man. Why don't you let people know where they can find out more about you?
Yeah. So follow me on Instagram at MaxUCoaching. That's the best place to find me. You can find, my website right there where I have articles and all the fun stuff that's coming up in the pipeline for me in the future.
Great. And you have a podcast too?
Yes, I'm restarting my podcast actually very shortly. I do have, about 30, 40 episodes already on Spotify. Those were from a few years ago now, but restarting it, the Simply Fitness podcast. Yeah.
Great. All right. I'll make sure that's in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining today, John.
No problem. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Anytime.
Thanks again to John Stein for that whole conversation. It was really good. It flowed. I even loved listening to it. We had a lot of good back and forth. I really value his experience from being someone in university, trying to be a trainer. And I remember the days where I didn't want to go to the gym. I've always battled my diet and trying to understand it. To this day, I still am trying to understand my psychology around it. It is a journey for everyone. And for him to say, it took seeing those photos, and that's what changed me. And I always preach this to people. Know your pivot point, find it, look for it, look for the thing that just lights that fire. And that's where the change has to happen gradually over time. And to hear his mindset around what makes a good trainer, I thought was really valuable. And it's great to hear it from trainers. You don't have to come to us, but I do believe if you need help, you should find someone. And I just really hope you find the right person for you, because that's where a lot of people miss it. If they're not meshing, and then they don't believe in trainers, they don't believe in coaches, which is really a misconception, because anytime you want to get from point A to point B, if you have a coach, you have a teacher, it gets you there quicker. So I can't reiterate enough. It's valuable to get the support. I loved when he talked about the cardio rehab patients, and that it's not that one event. And so many people misconstrue that. It's the lifestyle. It's the thing you're ingraining in yourself. And that's why I keep saying you got to find that moment, that spark, because if you don't, that one event will be it. But then even still, some people won't want to change their life. And you don't want to risk that one being the only one. because that one cardiovascular event could be it. And then some people still have a hard time changing. So it's really important to pay attention to the overarching effect of health. And I really enjoyed the discussion around the MAHA movement, because I think this is a very messy thing right now. But again, as I mentioned, I'm optimistic as to where we can take it. I think there's many different directions it can go, but for the most part, I think overarching, it should be positive. It could just be dangerous if we're starting to create standards or policies that really affect health in a negative way, because the person who's, looking after all of these policies doesn't understand the impact that it's going to have. So I think it'll be really interesting 4 years for sure. I think we've seen it already with so many things going on. So this is just adding to that fire. So thank you so much for listening today. I really appreciate you as a listener. And again, you get the Metabolic Cookie Monster program. It's going to be on sale by the time you listen to this. So don't hesitate to reach out. I probably can only sign up 5 people at this rate because this is the lowest rate I've put it out there. So please reach out as soon as you can. There's going to be extra additives to this program. I'm adding a cookbook. I'm going to be adding free workouts that you can take with you. There's a travel guide workout. There's the booty buys and tries workout. There's going to be the chest builder workout. And so you can take these things even after you're done the program and keep with you forever. So there's so much I'm trying to add to this because I really, really want to help you get to where you want to go. Regardless of what happens though, thank you so much for listening. I always appreciate you as a listener because I'm always trying to get you to where you want to go, help you chase your own ambitions, because we both know life is not about the pursuit of happiness, but rather the happiness within your pursuit. And I'll catch you next time.